But in the interest of time, I think at a minimum, we can get started, and we have enough members to accept the meetings. Did everyone get the minutes? Did everyone get a chance to review the minutes from the last meeting?
Yes.
No changes? Do we have a motion to accept?
So
Okay,
moved.
so Dottie said yes, she is joining the meeting.
So moved.
I have a second. Did it? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so the minutes.
I'll abstain.
And again, I think we can start a discussion on the comments. We went through these, I believe, at the last meeting, and then we formalized them. I think we may have added a couple of more. These will be presented to the select board as part of the presentation on findings of the committee at the meeting, their meeting on the 28th. So Wayne, we're just reviewing we're waiting for Dottie. Here she is. Hi, Dottie.
Sorry I'm late. I was in traffic this morning, believe it or not.
Wayne would have said the same thing. So we got started and we already accepted the minutes.
Excellent.
And we're just starting to go over the comments that will be presented to the select board for their review and approval at the meeting on the 28th.
So I think the one thing that sort of comes out as you sort of, read the comments that we've compiled over time here is all the overlaying requirements, right? I mean, we've got 40R, we've got 40B. How do we match all these things together? The wetland restrictions that we have out there. I think that's particularly for us going to be the challenge for the zoning side of things. So I appreciate that the comments are focused in on how all these sort of overlaying regulations, get together on this. So I think it's going to be important for us as we move forward as a community in developing these zoning to determine how do we make them work together, as opposed to having all these patchwork areas that this might be a 40R and this might be the MBTA community zoning by rights. So I think that's going to be a challenge for us. I think that's what we identified coming up till now, at least.
I think that's a good point, Rory, and I think other communities are struggling with that also. So I think they'll see that in other comments.
Right, good.
I think one point, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to technical assistance, but one of the comments I think that Wayne and I put forth was confirm the presumption the state's offering technical assistance to any community seeking support, not just for crafting the zoning, but also for analysis to confirm proposed districts will be able to support the density requirement and, mixed uses and based on other constraints. We'll give you an update on that. What we've basically heard is that technical assistance is really in the form of helping communities draft their zoning bylaw and not the level of detail in doing analysis. but there might be some other opportunities for that. So we'll talk about that when we get to that. So Dottie, if there are no other comments, I would take that the board is fine with these, and these will be the comments that are recommended to the select board at the meeting. Wayne? I'm sorry,
one
John.
Sorry.
I was chair last night at a different meeting.
And Stephanie, FYI, I'm taking over the minutes if that's helpful for you. So we had the Affordable Housing Trust meeting earlier this week, Tuesday, and I see Nikki's online and is presumably also busy with work and childcare at the moment. One of the things that that group brought forward is bedroom count. So, you know, we had a similar conversation that Connor brought up. Can we require a minimum percentage of commercial in this so that we don't somehow, you know, wipe out commercial properties when we put in the zoning? And the answer does seem to be yes, one can. Similarly, can we have a minimum 3-bedroom unit requirement so that we get as many you know, family-sized units as possible and not just the bare minimum? Obviously, as of right, you know, it would, you know, allow for them, but can we have some sort of a minimum requirement for 3-bedroom units?
Thank you so much, Wayne. I was just going to try to add in that I'm kind of commuting right now, so I appreciate you stepping in for me.
You bet.
Yeah, man, I think that's a great.
Dottie, you're muted.
I was gonna say, Wayne, explain that a little bit more. You know, if it's a minimum of 3 bedrooms, that would mean it would be a requirement that all bedrooms have to be, or are you saying there would be a minimum percentage?
Exactly so, a minimum percentage or a minimum unit count, something like that. So by way of parallel or analogy, 40B requires that like 10% of the units be 3 bedrooms of any development. You know, so could we require 10 or 20 or 30 or something like that, so we don't get proposals or projects that, while family-sized units are allowed as of right, they don't actually propose any. You know, is that something we could look at or consider?
Okay. And are you going to add that to the comments, questions?
Yeah, I think the Affordable Housing Trust would like to, and I think Stephanie's made a note, I believe, if that's an acceptable thing to add into the comments.
Yeah, I mean, I think this just matches in with, you know, our desire to mix all these, or, you know, our own desires of the community together, and how do we match that? You know, because, you know, building a whole bunch of 1 and 2 bedroom units isn't really what I think. It's probably even the MBTA is probably not their goal either. So.
Right.
I'm sorry, I have to step away. We have a structure fire.
Oh gosh.
Okay.
All right, great. Well, then if that is it for the comments and recommendations, we'll get that updated, Stephanie, and we'll put that on the agenda for the next select board meeting.
Yep.
The next one is to finalize and approve the guiding principles and concept.
So again, after the last meeting, we formalized those, what we had discussed, and wanted to review them, see if there was anything that the team wanted to add, change, reconsider.
I really like this. You know, I haven't seen any of the other towns really starting from this perspective of what are the guiding principles and how are we going to use this to meet our goals, rather than shoehorning in things that, you know, that might not feel appropriate. So for the guiding principles, contribute to economic health of Easton, at the same time helping to address the ongoing housing crisis in a responsible manner. Everybody think that's a good one? Consider areas of aging, underutilized retail development for redevelopment, supporting mixed use development. which I think that's something that we've always wanted through our master planning. Consider areas adjacent to or containing commercial development contributing to walkable and sustainable neighborhoods. For example, housing close to areas for potential work, shopping, entertainment, and recreation. That's really been a sustaining principle that we've had for our other housing. Protect the town's priority open space areas and critical natural resources and provide outdoor recreation and open space opportunities within or adjacent to the district. I love that. Contribute to the ongoing goal of providing affordable housing, both to maintain Easton's SHI status and to ensure needed affordable housing is available with inclusionary affordable zoning of 25% of units affordable to households at or below 80% of the area median income, paralleling 40B SHI affordability requirements. Everybody still on board with that?
Yeah.
Incorporate sustainability and green practices and incentives such as solar panels, passive building techniques, and recycling wastewater. I love that one. I don't think people really are thinking about that. Like that's very forward thinking. Anybody else have anything else that they think we should add to that now that we see that list?
Dottie, I don't know if this is appropriate for the project, but of course I'm looking through a particular lens, and I'm wondering if there's any opportunity for those who maybe don't typically have access to education to access education, whether it is bringing in college or university satellite sites that people could walk to, or even training, like in the high school, we're bringing in first responder training for people, or even using something like that as a cultural draw where people could. I've been trying to work with local colleges and universities to have, labs and art studios and places where students could display their work and share their work, and others could enjoy it as a cultural experience. But perhaps those could also be places for training or education. Not sure if that applies, but that's the lens I'm looking through. So of course, that's what I'm thinking of.
I think that's a really good point. Brockton in their downtown, they were trying to attract a satellite office from Massasoit Community College, and they have that now. So, we could certainly put that in if we're talking about putting housing near, retail to incentivize people to be able to work close to where they live. We could certainly put something in about education and having, encouraging and maybe incentivizing educational, I don't want to say a pop-up site, I'm not sure what you would call it, small educational centers.
Satellite sites or, I was just actually, I'm less familiar with Brockton than New Bedford. That's where I grew up. And I know that there are, they call it Star Store downtown, where they have, UMass Dartmouth has some studio space down there. They don't link with their local high school, but it's something that I've been kind of thinking would be a great opportunity for our students. Might also be good places for some more, I've just always been sort of dreaming about businesses that our transitional students could potentially work in, something like a small bake shop or smoothie store or something where there are opportunities for students who have, or adults who have developmental delays, where possibly they could get to work easily and have an opportunity for employment, just those kinds of things. Again, I'm no offense if it's not applicable here, but they're just things from an educational perspective that I've been kind of trying to explore for our students, but also I'm thinking for residents who might want to link to higher ed or training. Like I said, I know Taunton used to have a site in the Galleria for first responder, EMT training, things like that. It was like a learning center. I don't know.
No, I think that's a really good idea. And, you know, as you're saying that, I just had to write a letter for our age-friendly action plan yesterday to add to that report for the select board. And one of the things that we talked about is that Easton is a welcoming community for people of all ages and abilities. So maybe we put a statement like that in there to address people with, you know, a bit different abilities or accessibility challenges, you know, to really underscore that. I think that's great to pull that out. And I think that tying this to education and workforce development, it brings it full circle. So I really like that idea. Thank you for thinking of that. I know that you're working with Dr. Samuel's group for the transition of high school students being able to take credit courses to transition to college. So that could be really interesting to encourage that type in a mixed use situation.
Yeah, we just made it. We
Thank
just
you.
solidified
Great.
a partnership. We just solidified a partnership with Assumption University, and our students are going to be able to take three college credit courses. Maybe that's something that could transfer to people in town who are interested in exploring higher education opportunities. I also, this past weekend, went to Patriot Place and saw Oliver Ames students' art presented in the art gallery, and I just thought, I don't know if I should say this in a recorded meeting, but my husband was with me, and he said, didn't mean any offense to any artist, but he goes with me every year, and he said, you know, we always look at the students' art first, and then we'll just walk around the rest of the gallery. And he said, the students' art like kind of blew everything else away. And I just thought, what a great thing it would be to have something cultural in town like that, where people could come and really enjoy, or perhaps buy things or contribute to it. And it just might be a cultural aspect to add. Just things like that, different perspectives just to throw in.
Dottie, a couple of things. First, Wayne has in the chat made a suggestion on how that might be incorporated into the values. And Wayne, I'll let you articulate that. That was up, Leisha, during the master planning process in under the cultural component element of the master plan was bringing more art and incorporating students and things that were happening at the high school and in other areas as well.
Yeah, I was just trying to think of like what some very simple short language or statement that would get at that we could have in there as, you know, one of the goals or principles. And if something along those lines works, we can add that in.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about artist space before as, you know, as part of a mixed use development. So I think calling that out, we're really trying to paint the picture for the community of what this, you know, what we are visioning this to be and how it all connects. So I think we can wordsmith that, get that in there. Excellent, thank you. Smart comments first thing in the morning from people. Everybody's already getting going. Any other comments or questions on that?
No, just one thing is I'm a big fan of guiding principles as you go into these things, because it helps focus the discussions later on, because you've already had these discussions. I know that in conservation, anytime we sit down and go through regulatory changes or bylaw, you know, changes or whatever, we've actually already established what our guiding principles are, so that we can always, if we get into a disagreement about where we're going with it, we'll be sort of go back to, but you know, a month ago we said this is what our guiding principles were, and so I think it keeps us focused, and I think that's important to do this work up front about what we're trying to achieve. So I'm a big fan of guiding principles as you go down these paths.
I agree.
I agree as well. It's tempting to start thinking bigger and bigger and bigger and maybe get off track, and they really help keep people focused. We use them in the school department for everything.
Yeah.
Right. Next we have finalize, areas for continued study and potential zoning discussions.
Okay, do we want to look at the maps again? Is that helpful for people? And I think this really was just to kind of start to, again, it's to stay focused, understanding what the guiding principles are. All right, I'll pull those up and share my screen in just a second here. Okay, can everybody see that? Do you see the map?
No,
Or no?
the spreadsheet. You see the spreadsheet.
No, I see your mailbox.
Okay. All right,
Oh.
let's see. Let's see, just do this dash here. Let me try that again. Now, do you see it?
Yep.
Okay. So we'll kind of start from the west side of town. And again, the area in green is and the purple is one of the potential districts. Everything in purple is what already exists, Avalon, which has a density of 15 units per acre. And then you have this section down here. If we wanted to expand beyond that, you could include these areas in the district. And I think one of the things, I mean, we identified, I think it was 7 potential districts in total. Up, Connor's here. So thoughts, discussion?
I think nothing's changed since the last time we saw this, so I think that that's definitely an area for consideration.
So that is the Foundry, Eastman Street.
Hey, Stephanie,
Yeah,
would it be easier and faster to share the PDF of the 6 potential areas? Would that be sort of a faster way to like load and switch
Yes.
around from one to the
yes.
next?
Yep. Thank you, Wayne.
You bet. I'll close out of it and you can call that up then.
Or you could share it.
Oh, okay.
Why don't you do that if you have it? Let's stop right now.
Let me do various things. Share screen. Hello. Are people seeing that okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Cool.
All right.
So Dottie, how are we sort of stepping through this conversation? Do you have thoughts on that?
I think we're just reviewing the areas that you've already identified by looking at where we already have housing at, at a reasonable density. And if we were to expand on that, we know that one of the beginning requirements is it has to be a minimum of 25 acres. And we know that Avalon's at 21 point something acres. And we could add to that to get to the 25 acre area on that site alone, and then we have to come up with 25 acres in another part of town. It can't be spot zoned, but our approach to this was to look at where do we already have the dense housing and how can we build off of that, particularly in areas where we have housing and commercial and business that could help drive economic development even further in those areas.
So it sounds like this is a definite inclusion in the district, especially because of the size of it already. Wayne, do you want to move to the next district? And again, this is Foundry Depot Street. We don't have any existing multifamily that meets the density requirement.
So that's the Shaw's Plaza, the Residence at Five Corners, Whistle Stop.
And the potential is
I think that there's area for infill on that from right. Yep, I think that's a reasonable size. And what's the area on that for acres?
55 acres.
55 acres, yep.
Yep. Okay. Wayne, do you want to move to the next one? This was North Washington Street. The thought here, there is some multifamily here on the east side. These are condominiums that currently exist, and this is one of the areas that was identified as the potential train station should the South Coast Rail preferred alternative through Stoughton actually come to fruition. I think if you look at these they look like cloudy areas, those are areas where wetlands have been identified. They are probably more extensive. This is the DEP wetlands layer, and it usually is not fully, it doesn't fully define the wetland resources. So it could be a little bit more than that. You can see there's not a lot of new green area that could be developed.
Right. I think that that's, again, it meets some of the other criteria in addition to access to transportation. Even if the train doesn't come down that far, who knows, maybe there's a satellite parking, I think I've heard that kicked around a little bit. Satellite parking in a bus shuttle to Stoughton's trains, or it's still near enough, close enough. If we're an adjacent community because we're close to Stoughton, Mansfield, and Brockton, then these are the peaks where they should be, right? So Target Plaza is closer to the Mansfield public transportation. This is close to Stoughton, so I think it falls along the same theme. The only challenge here is that there's no sewer, and if there was housing, I don't know, maybe there could be a way to work the magic that we've done in some of the other areas with expanding sewer capacity to bring restaurants and, additional economic development to that area.
Right. And then I think as the team as the town starts working through what the zoning will look like and what will be allowed and any of the allowed requirements, that you'll get a better sense of how feasible it is to include any of these districts as part of the overall district.
And we're going to want a lot of public comment on this, because at the end of the day, we're going to need a town meeting vote on this. So this can't be just sprung on people. We need to really socialize this and get people's opinions and feedback of where they would, like to focus that development.
Stephanie, my apologies. I'm sure you explained this already. Can you remind me what the brown area is across from Roach Brothers? What does that indicate?
Hold on, I need to go to the actual map.
I think that might just be conservation land.
That's what I was going to say, but
yeah.
Normally it isn't brown, so
it's pinkish. Maybe
is it? It might be conservation restriction, but I don't think so in that area. Benton Circle. Yeah. I can go back to the map and find that. Sorry, I have too many screens open right now.
No, that's okay. It's just, it's unusable or unbuildable land, basically.
Yeah, and it would not,
That's the reason. Okay,
yes, it is conservation land. That's what it
thank you.
matches.
Yeah. And this is, what is that?
I'm just not sure what area that is, looking at it.
Yeah, probably one of those semi-random bits that the Conservation Commission, has in its portfolio of backland.
Forgive me, I was late for school drop off. I assume we're at the item 4, which is area for continued study of potential zoning, right? So are we delineating these? I know we had some discussion about this area in particular being something that we perhaps study but don't include in the first round of zoning reform that we need for the 10% and kind of hold it in reserve in the event that a T is actually constructed and then we need the 15%. Is that the intent? Or for at this stage, is that kind of agnostic and we're just going to come up with a bunch of areas for future study?
I think at this stage, we're just looking at, here's all the identifiable areas that we can explore, because we don't need to do anything with this right now.
Okay.
This doesn't need to be submitted right now. We have a year to kind of go through this. So this will really, in my opinion, it's the first step. I don't know, Stephanie, is that the way that you and Wayne are approaching it?
Yes, and are there any of these potential areas of the district? Are there any that we just want to rule out at this point outright?
Yeah, and then we can always rank them in order of
Right.
advantageous to meet our guiding principles.
Right, because you could always add to the district at some point in the future.
All right, next, Wayne.
And again, this is Queeset Commons. This is the purple is the 40R district with existing multifamily units. And the green would be an expansion of that area.
Now thinking back to what Leisha was talking about earlier, I mean, when this is developed, it's not like we can pick what goes in there, but wouldn't it be great if there was an opportunity to have a satellite space for Stonehill in that area where students could walk from the campus to that satellite and stop and get lunch and coffee and go to the bookstore and look at some artwork and make their way down there. So this is 24 acres with a potential for 62.
Right, yep.
Yep, I think that's a good space, although, I'm not sure that I think looking at it in two ways, I think that it's a good space that we could put additional housing in there because there is sewer capacity, but I don't know that I'd want to prioritize the housing in that area. I think that I think we should look at it for our regular zoning, but I'm not sure that by right is my top place that I think that would be, because I really want to make sure that we build that out for commercial first.
Don't we then lose the ability to basically get credit for the density of housing that's already there? Or is the Queeset, or is the what's already there under the 40R not compliant with the 15 units per acre?
I think that's one of the big questions and comments that we have. With the 40R, we get density bonus payments when the units are built. So would we continue to get those as those are built out, or does it go away? To your point, that's a question we have. And
Wayne, I have the spreadsheet up if that's what you're looking for.
Oh, you do? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
exactly what
So
I'm doing now. Never mind.
Queeset it's 16.67 units per acre.
Okay.
Is the density for that area. So, I mean, we could just include that and not just the purple area, not the expanded area.
In the purple area would be just the existing quiescent structures.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and that might be a good compromise. Dottie, I hear you, and I agree with the concern with going with the bigger green area. And it's sort of like the industrial park. We don't want to offline the few areas we have for potential commercial growth.
I guess it depends on how DHCD is going to look at what we already have, because they want increased housing. So if we come in and say, hey, guess what, we already have all the housing, we don't need to do anything, they're not going to let us do that. So
yeah, and they articulated that in the most recent FAQ and our conversation. Wayne and I were talking with Katie Lacey from the Mass Housing Partnership yesterday, and you could have, our understanding is still the same as my understanding from the beginning, that you can include already existing multifamily that meets the density requirement. You just, your district in total, and remember your district is all the pieces of the, all the areas of the district. You must be able to have the opportunity for additional housing.
right.
That meets the density requirement. So I think.
So we could tweak the size of that district and shave it down a little bit if we wanted to, if we wanted to explore that a little bit further.
Yeah, and I think the real question will be the response that we get from DHCD on how you incorporate the fact that this is already a 40R district with by right zoning. How does that work? Does your 40R is still an overlay district, and what you're doing is changing the underlying zoning for by right, so that if it were redeveloped in the future, it could be developed to the density of the multifamily, but you still have your 40R activated. And it's just a question. We don't know the answer to that at this point.
Yeah, so this one's going to need more study. Next.
So that would be a lower priority. So what I've started is kind of numbering them, one as a one priority and two is kind of secondary priority.
Yeah. Because it's not to say that we can't have housing in there. It just means it's not going to be by right housing.
Yeah.
Okay, next slide. Shovelworks. So this is about, so the Shovelworks is 8 acres in the purple, but what the potential expanded area, do we know like an estimate of how many acres that might be?
I think this was a conversation where we've got the Shovelworks area, and then of course there's a local historic district in this area, but there are some larger properties that are developed or could be developed, primarily the two former school buildings, the Lincoln Street School and the Grammar School, which I believe is offices, but could conceivably be converted into housing, perhaps even with additional construction out back, when it's that big parking area. So there's the question of, here's an area which may be near a future train station, if it ever gets built, which is a local historic district, which puts very clear controls over how much you can change the exterior of buildings, but already has this 113 unit multifamily property, and possibly a couple of others, including the already existing Lincoln Street School apartments and the Grammar School. So, what does one do, or how would one really look at this as a potential area for the MBTA zoning?
So I think that's another one of the ones that we would put on the table for needs further exploration, because I know we have talked about, the capacity for more density in the downtown, but I'm not sure. I think that we'd have to study that a little bit more, but I think that going based on, the criteria of having it be near transportation and your downtowns, it's definitely an area to consider. Anybody else have any comments on that? All right, the next one. So Washington and Maine, which is Hilliard's and I was going to say the Tedeschi's Plaza, but that's not what it's called anymore. Corfinio's down there in the bottom on the left.
And so that has the, already existing 38 residential and 1 commercial, so 39 units at the 244 Washington, I think it's called Washington Village or something, or nowadays. And then these, variously sized commercial properties and plazas going down to the corner.
Do you have the post office included in there?
No, that's this area here, that's the post office.
Okay. I did, where it was in that green, I wasn't sure if.
Yeah, that's interesting because we had talked about it, and because it is the post office and government land, presumably, thought there would be little opportunity for redevelopment. But I mean, if they ever closed it at some point in the future.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I think the constraint there is the lack of sewer. But again, if somebody was to build and put in a treatment plant there, or if there was ever a connection, to Brockton at some point 50 years down the line, it's certainly an area for consideration. Any comments or questions on this one? All right, next.
I think that's all the 6 that the group has been talking about.
Right.
What about Washington Street, Southeastern?
I think, and Stephanie can correct me, we did a little bit of looking at that, and it does have some, older little commercial strips on it, but immediately behind them are extensive wetlands. So when you actually look at the potential, it turns very constrained very quickly once you get off of Washington Street itself.
Thank you.
So I think that one idea there, though, and I think Nancy might be onto something a little bit there, is that like where the golf range is, they've actually been before Concom and actually have a wetland delineation already done there. So there's actually a lot more developable land than you might think there, because it's surrounded on 2 sides by extensive wetlands. But there's multi-acres there, maybe up to 10 there that might be developable. So interestingly enough.
Am I hearing that maybe we should add a 7th for a further study?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea that to at least look at that and figure out where the wetland constraints are. We may find that they're bounded too tightly, but I actually think that there is at least a 1 5-acre district there that you could put in there to get up to your number if you needed to. So good idea, Nancy.
Yeah. So we'll add something called like Washington South, centered around the driving range where.
Well, it's actually, that's Turnpike Street.
Turnpike Street. Oh, thank you. Okay.
All right, great. Thanks, Nancy. All right. So we'll add that to the collection. And I think I appreciate the work that you've done on this. It's very helpful to see it like this and with the overlays and everything. So kudos to GIS, I guess. Next, we have technical assistance updates. So you said you talked to Katie Lacey yesterday, so you must have some good news.
No, we don't have a lot of good news. Basically, and she's with Mass Housing Partnership. She is not with DHCD, so she wanted to make that very clear. But she certainly is privy to a lot of the conversation that's going on. And what she's hearing is that the technical assistance that's going to be offered is purely in crafting the zoning and helping out with the public outreach for getting your zoning adopted. So the type of analysis that we were hoping that we could do, and she kept calling it like a build out analysis, which really is kind of what it is. But the different scenarios about looking that would allow us to look at the target areas and how what the capacity is to achieve the goals that we're trying to achieve with the mixed use, commercial, residential, adding in, opportunities for open space, maybe, some type of community center or type of thing like that, with the topographical constraints and wastewater constraints. That's not the type of support that we're going to get. She did, in Dottie, you had forwarded, we actually received a lot of emails forwarding the complete neighborhoods opportunity and information on that. That looks like, from what we've seen, it's a multi-year approach. It's a real project where they will work with you and develop something of a master plan for housing in your community to meet the goals. When we laid out everything that Easton has been doing, and Katie's familiar with this. I participated, I attended a workshop that she was leading with a couple of other folks a few years ago, and had a chance to talk about Easton's approach to providing affordable housing and meeting the housing needs in town. And she remembered that, and she has been kind of following what Easton's been doing. And she strongly suggested that we look into that program and see if that would be appropriate and suitable for us. And she also said, because I think the deadline is early April for submitting an application, but she indicated it wasn't a heavy lift to submit an application, but she thought that would be an opportunity that might get us what we're looking for, but it might be a longer term outcome than in the time frame we're looking to actually adopt the zoning. So it might be a two-step approach.
It might be good to add that to our questions, our list of questions of where can we get technical assistance or funding to procure technical assistance to do build outs of these scenarios. Because I think that that's an important part, that if that we're really going to need that, especially when we do the public outreach, because people are not going to be able to envision what that looks like.
Right, and we would actually, we have that in some form in the comments where we had concern with the presumption the state's offering technical assistance, not just for crafting the zoning, but conducting the preliminary analysis to confirm proposed districts are able to support. So we have it, we can strengthen that. We were directed to the One Stop for Growth. There's a planning component in that. When we submitted our letter of interest for 5 projects, we had a different project in mind for that particular category. But I can explore whether we could swap that out or not, if that makes sense. And Connor and I had a very preliminary conversation about that.
Is that due this Friday? Tomorrow? The 18th?
That the letter of interest?
Yeah.
We already submitted ours. We did the early filing so that we could submit for 5 projects.
Oh, great.
I think the single project is tomorrow's date.
Okay.
And then I think the actual applications are May 1st for any of the available funding.
Okay, excellent. Great. Any other questions or comments about technical assistance? We're right at 9:53, so on schedule. The last item that we have is discuss the review team's ongoing involvement and potential meeting schedule. So the next step for us right here is to get the comment letter over to the select board for us to take a look at that and move that forward in the period of time to get it before March 31st. And then we have done our job for this first milestone of this project. So we won't have to meet every 2 weeks, but when should we do a check-in to bring the team back again? I think it kind of will be based on what we hear back from DHCD after the comment period, right?
Just refresh my memory, we have to submit our comments to DHCD by March 31st. Do they then have a public comment period separate from that, or that's the end of their public comment period?
My understanding, that's the end of the public comment period.
But then they have to review everything that they get from all the communities. And
Right.
these are draft guidelines, so they may change some of the guidelines. And if it's any indication of how it's worked this far, it takes them a while to go through that. So I'm not thinking we're going to hear back from them in 30 days, you know.
No.
Yeah.
But so maybe after they give preliminary feedback to, you know, and they have maybe revisions, then the group can get together.
And the board's meeting on the 31st, so we'll have feedback. Dottie, you'll be able to report back. We'll be able to report back any comments or feedback from the select board on the activities today.
As a point of information, I think that our appointment was through March 23rd. So if we were to have another meeting, we'd all have to be reappointed or extended.
Well, I think under the regulations, the select board have a body responsible for getting the comments back to DHCD, and given the select board don't meet till the 28th, and if there's any substantial comments that shift what's provided, then we basically have 1 business day, 2 business days to turn that around. I just don't.
Yeah, and I actually think that we've done our work. I mean, if the select board chooses to change it, that's their prerogative. I have certainly no problem with that. I mean, we're actually here to help them, and you know, they take it from there. So I'm just suggesting that if we were to have another meeting, even a month or 2 down the road, we would have to have our appointment extended to a different date, which the select board would have to do. That's a point of information.
It's a good one. That's my fault. We need to make it a standing policy that our appointments are forever, because I feel like a lot of these working groups, we do these very aggressive term dates, and we always end up having to go back and do that.
Yeah, well, we did it with 524 Depot too, so that was that's why it's in my head.
All right.
It also makes sure that boards that don't need to continue on in perpetuity don't just hang out there meeting for no reason.
I know.
Well, I think this was an incredible amount of work in a very short period of time, and I think that everybody had valuable contributions to this. So I'm really happy that we had this, because all the different perspectives really make a much better outcome, and really happy. This was a very good team. Again, I see what the other towns are doing. Nobody is doing this. I'm very proud of the way that Easton takes a proactive approach to these things and really looks at them thoughtfully. And I think that it's very helpful. The guiding principles and concepts still is really, I'm going to try to use that in everything that I do now, because I think that it really, you're right, it does shape and keep the focus on where we're going with this. So really appreciate everybody's contributions on this. And we'll move this to the select board and be back in touch when we're ready to restart again. So I may send out emails with updates as we hear things from DHCD, just for informational purposes, and keep everybody in the loop. So does anybody have any other comments or questions?
So we're not going to be meeting on the 31st, of course. This is sort of the last official meeting for the moment, and then we'll restart in a month or so when we hear more from DHCD and consider that and any next steps or ongoing involvement. But basically sit tight for a month or so and we'll hear more.
Yeah, it'll probably be more than a month from DHCD, but whenever we hear from them, we'll get that.
We're only going to need to meet when we have to start taking action. So, even after we hear back from them, staff will take a look at what the next steps will be and when the group needs to come back in again.
Right. Got it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, if somebody would like to make a motion to adjourn at 9:59.
So moved.
Second.
So that's Rory and Connor, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposed? Well, have a great day, everybody. Productive Thursday and Friday, and we will see you soon. Thank you.
All right, thank you.